that the philanthropy we will give you is money. I mean, so I think it would be very interesting for your organization. I'm just fascinated by it to work to teach other foundations that if I write you a proposal saying I need 5 introductions in this city, in this city, in this city, I don't want any money, just if you can give me a phone number and a name to use. I mean, I think now it would be, they wouldn't know what to do with
a proposal for 5 introductions. That's fabulous. Yes.
So I just think that it's just, you are touching on, I think, just the tip of an iceberg that from your side that you could work with foundations too, to let them know that that's not, that we want to think outside of the box, but so often are almost afraid to because of that relationship that grant seekers have with foundations.
Yes. Thank you for that. That's so thoughtful. I mean, you know what? I would. I bet you grant makers would like to hear that. I mean, I would. I'm interested in knowing like what kind of conversations we could have, because there are so many resources. Getting someone on a board, recommending that I'll get right to you, like that they join a board or nominating them, where they could bring their agenda to the table, to a table of decision making. That's power. I mean, that's worth something, isn't it? Because then 5 people on that board could give them a grant, and not only that. They could promote the ideals and the mission and the needs of their constituencies to a powerful audience. So, thanks. Yes?
I actually disagree with what you said because I'm a person and I work with a number of organizations. And I can't tell you how many times I've gone to funders and said, I'm working with XYZ organization. This is what I'm finding that their need is. However, I think it's, this, and this. What are your thoughts? What are your recommendations? And I can't think of one time when the World Spread came down at the very far from Situate and Community Foundation, Ralph Taylor has come back with some type of good information. So I think part of it is, as we are asking for the dollars, is that we're just not asking. And sometimes we're not here. That's what my heart is on. We go in and ask. We need one thing, but it's really this, and this that we actually need. So, part of it is us being clear on what we actually need before we go and ask that question.
We wouldn't have come up with the thought of incubating, except they said, well, we don't even have an office space. If we just had an office where we could work, where we could get telephone calls, and if we had that for a year, and then we said, gosh, we do have an empty space. So it really began there. It had its genesis in their articulated need. And then we recognized, we have more resources than we thought.
I think the important point there is communication.
Yes.
Just dialogue between each other and getting to know each other and not putting up so many walls. And perhaps it is a new generation, and perhaps it is a women's giving movement that cares in a different way than the school that's gone before. And that's what I hear from you, is to communicate and to understand.
And it means everything. Yeah, that's a big deal.
I mean, that's why I got the IBJ and stuff. It's that contact with Tara, and that she knows that I'm fairly new in my position, and she wants to do whatever she can to help as well. And it's building that relationship.
But each city is different. I mean, you're talking about New York, and to know what would work in your office to make that communication happen is an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's worth the effort toward engagement. Do you know what I mean? So if you reach out and the ED doesn't call you back, maybe the ED's not the person. Maybe the development director. Don't underestimate the administrative assistant. Now, when our foundation was really small, we talked about all the applicants together. If the administrative assistant had had a chance to talk a lot with the ED of the not-for-profit that was applying, she'd say, listen, I like Rachel. I'm going to tell you, she invited me to an event that they gave. The way she expressed affirmation and love and support to those girls who are at risk of being trapped. Rachel's fierce. You need to take another look at her. Now, I don't know Rachel, but I love the administrative assistant. Do you know what I mean? And I value her input. So who can you reach out to in that foundation who will respond to you? Don't be daunted if the big wig just doesn't call you back. Forget the big wig. Settle for the next wig. Settle for bald. You get the point. I'm being silly, but I mean, the point is, if you can make a connection with someone, that person knows someone else. And sometimes I think we feel like we're easily daunted. And I think what I want to say is I'm seeing more and more that people who will risk engagement and risk a bolder ask get what they need. I had no idea when I asked that congregation, when I said, here's one story of one person who doesn't have any dignity, that they would say, what do you need? But you just never know. It's so worth following James and asking. Is there one or two more questions before we, or at least? Yeah, sure.
I just wonder if anyone in the audience has done something out of the box that worked. Since we're all here from Central Indiana community, is there a best practice? Anything that has kanyere made you remember something that worked when you were dealing with the funder, when you were building relationships? Does anything come to mind for anyone?
I think a lot of it is, people are afraid to speak up. We're afraid, a funder's afraid, a nonprofit's afraid to show their whole full side. And that presents an initial barrier. And I think communication between a funder and a grantee is probably the most important thing, which is what you alluded to in the question. But how do you break down that initial barrier? So I know in our first project, this first year, I've had very few grantees really communicate with me. When everyone's been kind of on their side and on our side. And I know I'm a new project, but there are times when communication can help the process.
Do you know, we created very early on context for listening. We decided that we wanted to be a foundation. We were real clear that we didn't have the answers, that our grantees were much more of experts than we were, and that we really wanted to listen. And so we would invite them. Sometimes they'd come. Most of the times they'd come, especially if they hadn't gotten a grant yet, they would come. Sometimes they didn't, but we would say, please talk to us about your experience of X or Y. And when we invited them to talk, sometimes tentatively at first, but it really came. And so we created context specifically designed to help us listen and learn. We were not there to give our whole Sister Fund spiel. We were there to hear.
So kind of like focus groups.
It helped. It really was. It was sort of in a context of just of a reception. We're glad that, congratulations, we think your work is phenomenal, and we're really happy to be able to fund you. But then we just turned it right around and said, Mike's for you. Tell us about yourself. And I think after, too, they felt like, I don't think it's always good to tell the funder everything. I think a lot of times you should be very discerning about what you share right away until you have a relationship. And I really do think that trust in relationship can occur. It just sometimes takes some time to build. Do you know what? I'm impressed by some grantees who we rejected 3 years in a row. And they just came back, and they were as pleasant the first time. Now, one time someone got rejected, and I went to sit on this panel, and I didn't recognize the woman, and she leaned across the table and put her hand on her hip and said, "What are you funding now? Because you sure aren't funding me." I was so embarrassed and horrified. I was like, "Oh, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Who are you and what happened? Can we talk afterward?" She was like, "No, I want to tell you now." She was very, very angry. That would not be the absolute appropriate response. But then we had people who kept coming back saying, "You know what, we feel like we're a good fit. Let me tell you a story." Maybe I'll end with the power of story. There's nothing like a story to get your foot in the door. If you say, here's the problem in Indianapolis. There isn't enough housing for veterans, or there are not enough programs that build self-esteem for girls, or black boys need something more to do after school. And you give statistics and you say, here's what's happening in this neighborhood, and this neighborhood. It's never as effective as if you tell me about Sarah. Create a picture for me of one little girl. Create a picture for me, like I created for you, about the woman who's hunched over a fire hydrant, that's spewing water, and she's trying to wash. You can see that, can't you? So it's not me saying, we need a shower project on the Upper West Side. You'd be like, oh, we need a lot on the Upper West Side. Keep it moving. But if I show you the picture of this woman, that makes an impression in your head, doesn't it? you suddenly see it. It did at in the Riverside Church. I want to say, if you need to connect with funders who don't seem to be hearing you, you should think about your story. Are you communicating something that is provocative and moving and engaging? The stats by themselves won't always do it. A story sometimes will. Let me finally tell you that we got a proposal from a group that was doing great work with girls, but our whole board and staff was not sold on them. I got to the end of their proposal. It was a solid proposal. It was thoughtful. It was good, thoughtful work, but it didn't look like they were going to make the cut. Except the last 4 pages of their proposal was testimonials by the girls that they were helping. I sat on the Metro North train and wept on the way to work, reading what those girls had to say about their lives and about what that program meant for them. It touched me so much because it was what? Story. That I went back and I said to the board and I said to the staff and I even said to the founder, hey, look, we got to give them a shot because these little girls' lives are changing because of this intervention. It's worth, if it's just $15,000, we got to do it. A story can make the difference. They had a great program, but if they didn't share their story, I wouldn't have been sold. Do you know what I mean? Share yours. Figure out what the story is and share it. All the best to you.
Thank you, Kanyere. We're just so honored to have had you here with us. In your actions and in your advice and in your answers, you've reminded us that not only do we stand on the shoulders of giants who have done many great things, we also stand in the shadow of ordinary people who have done many small things. And so we thank you for your presence today. We thank you all for coming out on today and sharing in this presentation with us. And we encourage you to take a folder in the back and learn a little bit more about the Center on Philanthropy. And we look forward to seeing you at one of our next events. Thank you.